Dante Kidawau, Onowa McIvor na CD Gason, Genusio Sipi o Genida, Laquangan e Guas and Chathan a Ski na Wigan, Gakiao na Wagamaganak, Ekuse, hi.
Chugma, Sahochifort, Kari Chu, Chakasha Saya, Chikashi Yagni Atali.
Gwe watkwanu horada zawagwego, Kahtehrón ira Stacey ni Waxenoda, Wagenyahtu danu Kahnawà ni Dawagenu. Hi everyone, I'm Kahtehrón ira Stacey, Turtle Clan from Kahnawà Mohawk Territory.
I'd from the territories of the Lekwungen and Hosenich people. Nugu am Aliki Marinakis, Hetman Gligami Tlakwakse. I am a settler on these territories and I am learning the languages of Sinchothan and Kwakwala, Kailakesla.
Greetings, my name is Barbara Jenni and I live on the unceded territory of the Hosenich people, also known as Victoria, Canada.
We'd also like to introduce Mel Matthew, who is a research assistant on this project. As a team affiliated with the Natalno Indigenous Language Research Partnership at the University of Victoria, we acknowledge with respect the unceded territories of the Hosenich and Lekwungen peoples. This presentation will give an overview of Indigenous language revitalization during COVID-19, our approach to the research, what we learned, and where we'll go from here. Our research stories the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic on Indigenous language revitalization, which is relational and territorially based. Across Canada, the U.S., and the world, Indigenous communities, organizations, and individuals are working hard to keep their languages alive and bring them back into everyday use. The COVID-19 pandemic crisis that hit in March of 2020 was potentially detrimental to these efforts. The majority of language work is face-to-face and therefore had to halt immediately for the safety of our speakers, learners, and communities at large. Language workers took a moment to regroup amongst the rapid changes and the new and real dangers in their midst. Then, many did what Indigenous peoples have always done in the face of danger and adversity: adapt.
A key goal of our in-process research is to understand what shifts Indigenous language learners, teachers, and speakers are making in their language work during the pandemic. Through social media posts, survey data, and interviews, we are working to story a collective experience that will show the impacts of COVID-19 on Indigenous language revitalization efforts. In June, our team was awarded short-term project funding from UVic's Faculty of Education COVID-19 Emergency Research Funding. We have applied for additional funding to work with the Kahnawà Education Center, our Indigenous community partner, to continue this work. This video will share some of our early findings.
We had 140 responses to our survey from individuals representing 19 different Indigenous languages, plus English and French. We asked survey takers to tell us about their Indigenous language activities they participated in prior to COVID-19. The majority said that they participated in school-based, home-based, and/or community-based activities. Only 37% participated in online language work. We then asked what activities survey takers were participating in now during the pandemic. School, home, and community-based activities decreased. On the other hand, online language work increased dramatically, with 76% of respondents indicating that they were now doing language learning and teaching, at least in part, online. Overall, our survey indicates a 64% increase in the use of technology to support Indigenous language revitalization. Most of this online work takes the form of shifting previously in-person learning and teaching to virtual spaces, and also creating and sharing resources on social media. In order to better understand this phenomenon, our research includes a scan of social media activity. From March through July 2020, we collected social media posts about Indigenous language revitalization and COVID-19. We used Padlet to visually organize these posts and group them by key emerging themes. Our analysis of social media content, primarily from Facebook and Twitter, found that posts could be categorized around 6 key themes. Several social media accounts promoted Indigenous languages through contests, games, and hashtag campaigns. One, the hashtag 2020 Indigenous Language Challenge, spread across Facebook. Word of the day posts shared Indigenous language translations and new terms to talk about the pandemic. Social media accounts also shared Indigenous language songs, posters, databases, and even puppet shows about COVID-19. Posts promoted trainings to support Indigenous language revitalization work during the pandemic. Posts documented efforts to shift in-person language learning online and advertised newly created language classes. To support online Indigenous language education efforts, posts shared brand new resources and also promoted older existing resources. The final category of posts were in English and raised awareness of Indigenous language revitalization issues during the pandemic.
Our first goal was to document the shifts that were happening, but also the innovations, so that we could see if there's any lasting impacts that might be useful to our field. And secondly, to take those innovations, those adaptations, those solutions, and then be able to share them more broadly. Some folks are creating posters and short videos and practical language learning activities. So we've started a website to be able to categorize those resources and organize them in a way that they become freely available to communities so that they can see examples that they might be able to adapt to their language environment. Some of the outcomes that we expect might be longer lasting from this research and from the pandemic in general. The shift to online, we've actually seen greater access for language learning. So people living outside of their territory, but we don't know a lot yet about quality of learning online, or so the impact of that shift to online is yet to be assessed. And finally, what we've heard in the early part of our interviews and the survey research is that we're seeing people turning to Indigenous languages as a source of comfort and wisdom in times of crisis. And this is something that Indigenous people have always done, but what we see is an increase during this time.
On behalf of our research team, thank you for your interest and attention. We look forward to discussing our findings and the future of Indigenous language revitalization work during and beyond the COVID-19 pandemic.